Welcome to Audiogyan with Kedar Nimkar, a podcast that documents insightful conversations with Indian designers, artists, musicians, writers, thinkers, and creatives of all types. Catch us on iTunes or visit audiogyan.com for more Gyan sessions. Here's your host, Kedar Nimkar.
Today I have Pavithra Dikshit with us on Audiogyan. She's a typographer, graphic designer, and presently working in Landor, Mumbai. She's also a part of Kadak collective, and today we are here to talk about Indian graphic design with Pavithra. Thanks, Pavithra, for giving us your time, and welcome to Audiogyan.
Hello.
As I told, we'll be discussing about the world of Indian graphic design. So I've come up with few questions because my knowledge of graphic design, especially in the Indian context, is very digital. So I wanted to touch upon different aspects as well. And let's see how we...
Yeah, sure. Looking forward. This will be exciting, I'm sure.
You say your exploration in design is within the Indian context. I mean, this is the line which I borrowed from your website. So what do you mean by that exactly? What is Indianness when it comes to graphic design?
I think fundamentally I'm Indian, and it's really hard to remove who you are and your roots from what you do, especially as a designer, because this is more like a vocation. And inherently, my context is always Indian. I have actually never lived abroad. I have traveled quite a bit, but my context in this case is always everything that surrounds me. And so if you think about it, my experiences on a daily basis influence the kind of work that I do. Whether it's my personal body of projects or it's the work that I do for clients at Landor, it's always based on what I see, what I learn. It could be about the chaos in the city of Bombay. I was born in Chennai, but I've been raised here. So my context is very rooted in who I am. And I feel like a lot of designers in India don't really embrace this as much as they should. You can't take this out of you. You might ape XYZ person in the US or XYZ person in London. It's great. Their work is fabulous, but your context will always end up being, even if you're inspired by the kind of work that they do, because you're designing for an Indian audience, you automatically start changing things, and that makes the context or the work that you do. And in design, context is everything. You can't remove that. Or you can't judge a piece of work in isolation. So for me, when I mention within the Indian context, is that most of my work revolves around India or Indian graphic design, or working for clients in India, or the work that I do is for an Indian audience largely. If a global audience gets to see it, great. I'm really happy with that. But the audience is mainly, for me, Indian.
Mm-hmm. But when you say that Indianness, are there any specific keywords which you want to associate with, which brings in the Indian part of it?
I think it's just really more about, at least for me, a lot about introspection. It's about going further into your roots, being more rooted about who you are. And every person is different in many forms. And of course, I do have a differentiation. And that sort of USP you can channel into. And that is an inherent Indianness, because you're a kind of person that has been raised in the Indian subcontinent. And I think this is fairly obvious, especially when we work as a group of women in Kadak. Kadak is a collective of South Asian women across the world. We were originally 8 of us. We were Aarti, Akhila, Aindri, Janine, Kaveri, Garima, Meera, and I. And then we further since expanded to Shreya, Supriya, Kritika, etc. There are lots of people who come in on different chapters. And all of us have graphic storytelling at some level in the work that we do. It's narrative based. There is stories that we're trying to narrate from the Indian subcontinent as women. And this is an inherent Indianness that nobody else can. Your stories are who you are, and they come from where you come from. You can't disassociate that. And that is why Indianness is like a part of everything that you end up producing in any case. So that's the Indian context, that's the Indianness. So it's not necessarily an outward visual color or a grammar or the kind of work that you produce, but it's technically where it starts from.
Interesting. And if you can also tell us how big or wide the canvas is for with respect to Indian graphic scene, just some context. This could be this is slightly geared towards the audience who would like to get into graphic design. So how wide? Because for me, the journey, at least with Audiogyan, like the design canvas is just widened like 10x. So similarly,
I mean, graphic design is a really, large body of work. To be fair, the smartphone didn't exist when I decided to be a graphic designer. Now I only design for the smartphone. So like had I thought of this when I decided to be a graphic designer, thinking, okay, I want to produce X kind of work, then that I may not exist today, because right now we're only designing for a generation of smartphones. And if somebody gets into the field thinking, oh, I want to produce design for a generation of smartphones, by the time they graduate and actually start making work, the smartphone might not even exist. We don't know what the future looks like. So it would be really hard to give that. So I would say the canvas for graphic design is really large. Like, I think it's super wide. You could do so many. There are like disciplines and sub-disciplines. Like when we started studying, typography was a discipline, then became type design, and then there's lettering, and there's hand lettering and calligraphy, and there are pointed pen. There are like variations further and further within these things that I was not necessarily aware when I started graphic design. And then the more people pick a specified, like they branch out into typography, then they do a super specialization and a further. So it's sort of in a way I would compare it to like medicine, where people start like, okay, I'm going to study an MBBS degree, then I'm going to become a general surgeon, then a plastic surgeon, then, further on. And there are so many ways to go ahead. Similarly, designers like that you can be a super specialized person. So you can go dig deeper, or you can just grow wider. Like you could, either or is fair.
So you're saying within graphic design also you can do so much?
Yeah.
Or design?
Yeah. The canvas is unlimited. Like I sort of specialize in my in my professional career in the field of corporate branding, which is why I work at Landor. But honestly, even within corporate branding, you can specialize for only a certain kind of consumer segment. Like you can say, okay, I will only work for consumer-facing brands, or I'll only work in the segment of food. And even in food, you can decide which one you want to work in. So there is like a market for everything. And honestly, you could be, I'm saying corporate branding is then saying wide. I want to work I could work from everything from finance to insurance to oil and gas to, food to restaurants. That's the wide spectrum. But then after you work there for a couple of years, you could be like, I want to get into super specialization within this. And then you could go deeper. And then you'll just become the master at it. And that's the beauty of something like this. So graphic design, I think, is just, I guess, like somebody saying, Acha, I've studied engineering or I've studied medicine. But like, what's your specialty within that is what makes you who you are.
Wow, that's well put.
Yeah, I think that would be my thing.
Superb. So I also stumbled upon a lot of work which is documented online in your blog and other places. And in that I saw something to do with paper, and it was cut out and some salads were made, and there were different things which are happening on that blog post. So I wanted to ask you, can graphic design be tactile in nature? What is the role of paper or when it comes to graphic? Because again, if paper is just an example, but are there other elements to it? And because my exposure, as I mentioned in the beginning, is very digital. So
okay, graphic design is the practice of like creating a visual concept. Okay, it is basically it has to communicate something. So there has to be a narrative or an idea. At its base core, that's what it is. I was fundamentally, while learning in design art school, I learned to think on paper with a pencil. So no matter what the output is, I start there. So whether in the end it has to be a sculptural piece, or it has to be like made out of paper, or it has to be made on the computer, or it's Photoshop work or Cinema 4D, everything starts on the paper for me. And I think like a lot of people who were traditionally taught art would work the same way. But medium no bar, graphic design is just imagination. What does your imagination let you or allow you to think of? And then you can manifest it in any format. So when I started the paper salads, the project that is like, it was called a salad every week, where fundamentally I really wanted to eat healthy. And I said, okay, let's make this into a design project because otherwise, ye nahi hone wala. Let's just be honest. Ye like aspirational to say I'm going to eat a salad. But actually, honestly, I did enjoy salads. But it's just that the effort to put them together and it's too much. So I said, let's make an art project out of it. So that's literally where it started. And before that, I had, sort of participated in the global 100-day movement project, whatever. And I had sort of toyed around making some stuff with paper. And so then I was like, okay, I'm just going to use paper in this one. Let's see what it looks like. So then on a whim, literally, most of my projects just start on a whim. Please never ask me how this works. But when I started on a whim, I decided that I'm going to make the same salad twice. And I once to eat it because that's the whole point of the project. And then once to recreate it in paper. So when I started it, if you actually looked at the first salad I ever made, it looks exactly like the salad that you eat. It's just a bunch of things thrown together. And it was just randomly sized cut paper. Shapes were triangle, rectangle. I wasn't thinking about it. It was not designed. Because how I saw it is how it looked on paper. And then it was done. But then as I progressed as it's a composite piece, so I've done it over a period of time. And when I worked on the piece over period, then I was like, okay, the oranges should look more like oranges. This is a pear, it should look like a pear. The salad leaves, if it's a kale, it should look curly. If it's a spinach, it should look more X. I started to design them because obviously the designer in me has to come inside everything. And then I slowly started to make them more interesting, the forms, and I started add layering, then color combination, layouting. Why don't we do this like food styling? And then I basically took the concept of food styling into paper. And that was fun for me as a designer because then it's challenging and you have to constantly innovate and think. So that was a fun project from that aspect. So graphic design, for me, everything would start on paper and pencil and a sketch. And then I would be like, okay, my imagination is saying. So when I started it, I never thought it's going to look like 3D things layered one above the other with color combination. When I started the first piece, I hadn't thought of that. But then that's what it ended up becoming. So I guess.
So you could have, if you were better with some other materials, say wood or for example.
I could have made it. Yeah, I mean, I didn't try.
But how does that tie into graphic design as such? Because
there's a very famous. Required? No, it's a very famous thing. Like I don't remember who said it right now, but if you design one thing, you can design everything.
Yeah, it's Massimo Vignelli.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I was like, it's a famous person. I was thinking it was Ray Eames, but I was like, no, it's not. But if you can design one thing, like I just wanted to design food at that point because I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to motivate myself. And I felt that that's interesting. Like I feel like a lot of design is from personal experience. And that's what truly makes it like going back to this whole Indianness. No two people, even if they are copying the work that you do, if somebody makes paper food, great. But they won't have the same context as me. They will not find the same ingredients as me. They may not at the same point think of this salad like how I thought of it. And it's fine. You can't, I mean, whatever. I just don't worry about these things. But at any point, what you produce, if it's truly coming from who you are or the place that you're from, I think people will resonate with it. I don't think you should think about it so much. Is my general norm.
Nice. Yeah, actually, I'll slightly change tracks and also want to know more about you as a designer. So, how did you choose? How do you choose what you should work on? Especially, I've again read that you're very much passionate about side projects. So, everybody has so many ideas, and like you have to see. You have built composite projects also. So, can you tell us more about that? What it is, why, and how do you approach a project?
So basically, some of the things that so this was the first sort of self-published book that I made, and it's titled Discipline. And I kind of think people think of me like that, and I kind of also agree. Kind of somewhere through when I was working, I figured out that discipline is the most underrated skill set to have. I don't know why. It's
not very tightly associated with a designer or a creative
because most
person.
people think that creativity just comes to you and you just you wake up and then you're super innovative. I mean, let's just be honest, it has never happened to me. I don't even know what that looks like. So maybe I'm just not cool enough or gifted enough for that kind of moment. But it has never happened. And I think that to achieve anything worthwhile, you need to keep at it consistently. And I truly believe that. You take a sports person, you take a doctor, you take an artist, you take a writer. Everybody shows up. That's what you have to do. Doctors hone their craft over and over and over again. Would you get operated from a doctor who's got 2 years experience versus somebody who has 30? Obviously 30, because practice makes a man perfect. That quote was not made for anything else. And whether it's a sports person or whether it's a writer, the writers are told they wake up every day and the first thing that they do is they write for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that is discipline. That is nothing else but discipline. Whether it's people who go to the gym or work hard, and you ask all these people, what keeps you motivated? I'm like, they always say nothing. You just wake up, even if you don't want to go, you go do it, because that's what you're supposed to do. And at some point, all of those things add up. And there's a a famous Paula Scher quote over here that I would like to say, is that when she designed the city logo, she wrote on a paper napkin, and people always ask her wow, that took you 5 minutes to draw. And she said that, yes, it took me 5 minutes to draw the city logo on a paper napkin, but it took me 34 years to learn how to draw it in 5 minutes. And that's what you have to pay me for. And that's what discipline and consistency is. And it's highly undervalued in the field of design. And I find that to be kind of ridiculous. I feel like if you have a routine or a regimen, I'm not saying it has to be strict, every day wake up at 6 a.m. That's not the point. But then if you decide, set something loosely, once a week I'm going to do X, or put yourself into a practice to do something that you want to do. Results may not show up today, tomorrow, day after, but it will add up. At some point, you will be known for doing that thing over and over and over again, because you will tend to get associated with it. And I think the people associate me with discipline because I tend to put everything into a routine. It's just a thing that I have, because I feel like it helps me achieve more. And, nothing comes easy. That's hard work, homework to make the work consistent. Even if you take some of the world's most famous artists like Vincent van Gogh, or closer home, Amrita Shergill, or if you think of
In
F.N.
fact, this
Souza.
Paula Scher thing which you said, I think it was exactly Picasso had a similar experience.
All of them. They all every day would wake up and paint. Whether people were buying their paintings or whether they were just making paintings for themselves, or they was in the end going to go to the garbage bin, they would wake up and paint. They were not asking people is this amazing, or is this what I need to be doing? You show up, and then at some point it'll all come together. And you have to trust the universe to make that work. But then for the universe to make anything work, you have to show up. And that showing up needs discipline and consistency, which most people undervalue. I think that if you can train yourself to be disciplined, trust me, it would change the game completely.
Yeah, I remember few of the articles which I'd read, at least on, I think, brain pickings.
Yeah.
They have a lot of articles related to discipline, especially with authors and writers.
Yeah, because it actually works. I don't know how else other people do it. Like I said, I've never had this epiphany moment where I'm just that thing, I'm going to do that. I don't know anybody who does that either. So, clearly discipline is working for other people. So I'm pretty sure it will work for most people if they tried.
But I think there is that aha moment also, but it just, I think is just a manifestation. It's somewhere subconsciously building with that practice and with that routine which you put in.
Yeah, you don't just wake up and be I've not done a thing, but today this idea is going to change the world. Not happening. Let's just be honest.
Cool. So there's a connection between your work life and work life. So how does the day job work in the sense? Actually at Landor, or with your personal thing with respect to design and your discipline?
I think this actually, I speak about this often. I have a dual identity thing as a graphic designer. They sort of work as I tell everybody, it's like a yin-yang. I'm totally in a yin-yang. The work I do at Landor is for corporate clients, we're solving problems on a day-to-day basis. And that is scale and impact. Okay. Last year, I didn't really work on the project, but somebody, one of the designers in our office, redesigned the National Stock Exchange logo. Wow. Think about it. She's always going to be known as the person who designed the NSE logo. Till the day she dies. That is unbelievable. That kind of impact.
Or the logo changes.
Yeah, the logo changes. Yeah, of course, right? And she's always going to be that person who designed the logo, irrespective of what happens. And that kind of scale is impossible for you to get when you're making a small personal project. You can't impact the lives. We work with clients at all levels. We have packaging projects for like Britannia or Mother Dairy. And those kind of projects, if you're designing, we design the Mother Dairy Dahi pack, and that sort of goes to people's homes. You as a designer have the ability to impact what people are looking at on a daily basis. Biscuit packaging, chips packaging. These are things that people consume on a daily basis, and you as a designer are responsible for how that looks everywhere. And so that is like one yin. And the yang is, that work is great, of course, but then it can kind of bog you down with all the things involved with it. It's great on if you think about the impact and scale and the kind of things that you can end up doing. But then there's also a large part of you that wants to be creative. Okay, now, a lot of these projects are more problem solving involved. They, of course, involve creativity. There is no way out of that. But then if you want to explore something new, you can't test it on a project for a client, because that's just, you don't even know if it's going to work. So it's not a good place to try. Sounds aspirational, but maybe a little too much. So experience tells you should try it for yourself. And the best way to try it for yourself is to make a side project. And that's what I do. So
unless the client has given full liberty to experiment, but they hardly give.
No. Let's just be honest. I mean, clients are great, but they're also investing money in this. So I really don't think they'll just be like, I'm okay to do anything. They will give you a certain amount. We've had great flexibility in a lot of projects. One of them being Godrej Nature's Basket, where we did the whole like retail experience and like brand language for who they were like 2 years ago. But even with that much flexibility, you still want to do more. So if you had to explore, then what would it be like? So like when I present, sometimes I talk about it and I say that when we did Godrej Nature's Basket, when we started the project, I had already finished making all the 52 salads in my discipline. But think about it, they sort of timed pretty much the same time. And so one is a yin to a yang, and then all the things that I learned in that project, we could manifest into like, I would be like, okay, no guys, we need to do X, Y. These are tactile materials that we could think of using if we wanted to, as an exploration, whether the client buys it or not is secondary. But that ability you can only get, have you already tested this before? So you have to be able to not worry about making money in your personal projects and be like, okay, I'm going to experiment. I'm going to try and, test new grounds. Every time I do a new project, I try and push myself into something that I have not done before. It's pretty hard, but it's a good way to see if you can A, grow as a designer, and B, grow your practice or grow your expertise, and then sort of see how that can be involved into the work you do for clients. In some way, they always influence each other. There is no way that they both exist independently. They sort of work in a interesting wave, sort of, ups and downs. Sometimes this is better, sometimes that is better. And you will find that synergy working for you. At least it has totally worked for me. So I feel like there is work life, and they all sort of like meld into one thing. For me, design is a vocation. It's not a job. Like I never truly ever switch off. I'm constantly looking at things and I'm like, hey, that packaging is cool. Hey, they changed their logo. Like you never tune out. There's very little chance as a designer, because you're constantly trying to think of how does that actually work and how do they come up with it? Even something as basic as like lights. You will constantly be doing that. So I guess it's sort of deeply embedded in who you are as a person. So hard to disassociate.
In fact, I'm thinking of one question which is slightly on the fly, because I have dealt with this when I was working in agency long time back in Web Chutney. Especially this question is more towards the work side of it. A lot of times what happens is advertising or agency kind of a model, the client expects options, right? Whereas in product design, we slightly stay away from product design in the online user interface kind of a thing. You decide on an approach and then keep evolving the design. You don't say, isko pila mein dikhao, neela mein dikhao, right? At least in product design. In graphic, there is scope. So do you deal with that, or how do you deal?
There is always room for a sari shop. I mean, there is always room. But I mean, if you're younger and like maybe you work independently, you probably don't have lesser room to say no to a client. But then when you come from a company like a studio like Landor, where I guess like 7, like we've been around for decades, 78 years, I think, or 77, I'm not sure. But you've been around for like so long that people trust you. So when you walk into a room, they know that it's not coming from some random place. And it's not like I'm the only person on the team. There are like 5 other people. And so you will always get an expertise opinion. So we do present options. I wouldn't say we don't. But it's not like a sari shop where you're like, you have 30 logos and this doesn't work. We just, we present a certain spectrum and we say, this is where you are, this is the shift you want to make, or this is the vision you have for your new company, and we will bring it to life, and this is what it is. And we present a series of things to you. And you can pick if you don't like anything at all, and if it's completely off the brief. Design can be subjective. Like I don't like this color.
Correct.
I'm not very sure this font should be rounded. But why? Like, do you have a fun? Does it not meet the brief? We always have an evaluation criteria when we go to the client. So it's not like mood based. We tell them, okay, this is the brief given to us. So these are the 5 key considerations we've kept. And these designs map back to these 5 key considerations. And these 5 key considerations have to be told to the client in advance. So everybody's on the same page when they walk into the meeting. The worst thing you want in a meeting is when those 5 things are not said and the client is on some other page and you are on another page and there is no way there will be a consensus. So when you keep a key set of considerations on the page and then you map back your design to it, plus they can see, okay, these are the considerations. So it's not a subjective opinion, it's always objective. So there's usually a consensus saying, okay, we think this works best, but we are not very sure. Can we see? So we hone in on an approach and then there may be iterations from there. But it's very rarely that there will be like a massive sari shop going on. We really it's not like that.
Yeah, in fact, this calls for a separate Audiogyan session with someone whom you recommend. That how do you position design to be very objective?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Pavithra, I would like to conclude with one last question.
Yeah.
A lot of your recent work involves words and typography.
Yeah.
Could you talk about it? I mean, also reading or sharing a lot more of books that you have read, or you have also been a reader. So how important it is. In fact, in the first initial conversation also we had discussion about typography and calligraphy or words. So if you want to just summarize this.
Yeah, so I was always a voracious reader since I was in school. I don't know, I have endless books. I've read every Enid Blyton available, I think, and Roald Dahl. And my parents would really encourage reading because they felt like it was amazing. And sort of when I went to art school, because everything was all you're supposed to be a visual person, I just stopped reading. I don't know why. It was something just switched off, and I guess it was college, the amount of parties you attend. Everybody knows about art school parties. So then you became this person that just stopped reading. And then I started working again, and I sort of felt like my imagination was only what I was seeing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. That's great. But then I also feel like input is equal to output. This is a thing that I actually believe in. It's what you feed your body is what's going to come out of it. So if your world focus is only about reading about designers, what other people are doing, that's all that will come out. So to be truly different or think beyond what you could possibly do, you should be able to read. It could be anything. I'm not saying you need to pick up a novel. It could be graphic novels. It could be articles on the internet. It could be short form reading. It could be small booklets, short stories. There's a range of writing available in the market right now.
It's surplus.
Surplus, yeah. And you could start small, grow big, whatever. I feel like reading also should be a spectrum. You should not be I only read X books. I only read science fiction. But why? I mean, it's great. You love science fiction. You can read 50% of your books as science fiction, but you should open your worldview beyond that. I read everything from I love history. So I read a lot of history. Every 5th book of mine will have something to do with either world history or Indian history. And then, like I said, it's something to do with my innate pride of being who I am, an Indian. But there's also a large part of me which likes to read because I used to read fiction when I was a kid, whether it's Enid Blyton or Roald Dahl. So I have this innate sense of like Harry Potter. My God, those worlds are amazing. I still like to go back to some of them. And some of the books I read are also on that spectrum. So it's not, you don't have to worry. I read young adult fiction. I read short stories. I read politics, everything. Because honestly, you don't know who your next client is going to be. And you don't know when what you read is going to influence what you do. So it's very important to sort of feed yourself in my understanding. And because I read and I used to like writing, I sort of decided to see if I could try to do authorship of some design projects. It started with Discipline, the book, where I wrote some things. It's not truly very successful at it. I was kind of very young when I did it. So, but then since then I have evolved being able to write. And I feel like when I work, especially with Kadak, I feel like there's an ownership and authorship or like narrative, storytelling is really important. So you start to hone how to narrate things. So recently I've been working on this project where I answer the same question, which is, what is an artist if not a series of self-portraits? Okay, like if you think of any famous artist in the world, everybody sort of makes themselves the muse and keeps painting themselves. I really was not interested in painting myself, so I decided to write about myself in 100 different ways. I think I'm at 35 or something, but it's hard. It's hard to be able to put yourself out there and still make it work. I'm unable to do it every day, I'll be honest, but it's interesting. And there are so many people who write to me looking at that and like, oh my God, me too. And then you're like, wow, there is a lot of people who think and work exactly like you do. So you're not necessarily unique as how much ever you like to think, but it's, I guess, the permutations and combinations of what comes out more. And I feel like reading and writing has made me a more thoughtful and better designer. And I truly recommend it. If you have, I tell this to all the people, all the junior designers and students who write to me, I'll be like, and a lot of people ask me recommendations for books. And I'm like, I will not recommend design books because I think that, yes, there's great design books that you can get out of your college library if you're already interested, or you can research on the blogs. They're all pretty much the same. Everybody has the same 10 favorite books. There's very little that I can tell you that is not on the list. But truly, if you want to be imaginative and inspired, I would recommend reading beyond design. To truly impact or influence the kind of work that you do.
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent. Is it more like a tip or a suggestion for graphic design and
No, I just think all designers, graphic designers are just like one aspect. Even product designers. I feel like to be truly thoughtful and think about the kind of work that you want to do, you need to be informed about the kind of people that are out there. Like, if you don't know, otherwise, there's this very famous TED Talk I would like to talk about. It's called The Danger of a Single Story. It is, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but Chimamanda Adichie. She's an African-American writer. And she talks about how if you have only a single lens on what people tell you, like everybody, all Indian news channels are saying the same thing. And if that's your worldview, then that's the only way you'll be able to think. One example is how news feeds you, what news channels want to feed you. And they will talk about, like, for example, we always talk about like how the West portrays India as a land of turbans, cows walking, holy men, and people in uneducated women in bright color saris. Honestly, the ground reality is very different. But then, like, they don't know it because their media has portrayed it in a certain fashion. And when they come to Bombay and they're like, wow, this y'all are like exactly like us. And I'm like, yeah, but why would you expect anything otherwise? But then their view is of a certain kind and they always think that, oh, India is a land of yoga and this is where we're going to find ourselves. But honestly, that's not true. I mean, it is partly true. It's not like entirely wrong. But then there is a much larger aspect that they don't understand and know. And I feel like that's what happens when you read only design books or like you only read a certain kind of reading. Your worldview is only that much. There's only that much that you can know. So to truly know beyond, like when we were taught Indian history in school, it's all north upward. As the Mughals, the Marathas, nobody knows what happened to the south. So if you actually think about it, the Coromandels are just not discussed as a part of history, but that's such a large part of Indian history. But you have to be able to read to understand that. And nuances come from there. And I think it's truly important.
Wow. That's, yeah.
Which is why I truly recommend reading. I mean, of course, I've been reading since forever. So for me, it's really easy to say this. But I would say, even if it's just reading beyond design articles on the internet, we could start even just there. You could read about politics. You could read about the culture. You could read about another country. You could decide to read an author from a different country at least like a few times a year. So that, how do you know what Japanese people are reading, or how do you know what Koreans are reading, or Australians? Their worldviews are so different from who you are. And I think reading just opens up that world.
Yeah, truly. Okay, I think this is a good note to end this. Obviously, there are a lot more things to be discussed, but just on a ending note, if people have to follow your work, what are you up to? What's in
well,
pipeline?
I think I update Instagram the most. That's probably where it's first name, last name. I'm not innovative and cool and don't have a cool handle, but it's Pavithra with an H because I'm South Indian, and Dikshit. You can find me. Actually, that's my name on all social media handles, but I would update Instagram the most. So it's Pavithra Dikshit on Instagram.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you, Pavithra, for giving your time.
Thank you. This was great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. Catch us on iTunes, Saavn, Stitcher, or any podcasting app you use. Do rate us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Stay tuned for more Gyan on Audiogyan.com. Till then, bye.